soon-to-be members of the public, I'm sure. As usual, the agenda papers and public forum submissions are available on the Council's website. Can I draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure, which is outlined on the agenda and is currently being displayed on the screen. Screens behind me are not working today, but the screens behind you are. The meeting is being webcast, so can I remind everyone to speak into the microphone to ensure you are clearly heard throughout. Agenda item 8, the Education Capital Update and Capital Investment Decision, contains an exempt appendix with commercially sensitive information, and any discussion on the content of this element will need to be held in exempt session, and Cabinet members have been given access to these appendices. Agenda item 2 on public forum, a reminder that as usual statements and questions will be taken at the time the relevant agenda item is discussed, and I'll reply to questions or ask the relevant Cabinet member to respond. Agenda item 3, apologies for absence. I don't think we've got any today. Everyone's in. So it's great to have people back and to be back in the building as well. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask anyone to declare an interest in relation to today's agenda, and we'll make a note of that. Tom?
It's declare an interest in item 11, which is the integrated care system. I also work for an organisation funded by the ICS, so I'll step out for that item.
Thanks, Tom. Any others? No? All good. So just Tom. Thank you. On to agenda item 5, matters referred for consideration by scrutiny or full council. There are no referrals for this meeting. Agenda item 6, reports from scrutiny commissions. There have been 2 reports submitted from scrutiny commissions. Tony, you're bringing these?
I am indeed, thank you. The first report is in relation to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board's Inquiry Day on livable neighbourhoods. The ultimate objectives of the Livable Neighbourhoods Inquiry Day were to support members to understand the aims and purposes of livable neighbourhoods and to influence the Bristol approach by providing feedback and input on the draft Livable Neighbourhoods Handbook. The Overview and Scrutiny Management Board has made the following recommendations. Bristol City Council to consider and implement the feedback provided by members on the draft Livable Neighbourhoods Handbook regarding the format of the handbook, and in particular the creation of 2 separate documents, one to inform engagement with local members and the other a more technical document. Bristol City Council to consider and implement the feedback provided by members regarding the content of the handbook. And finally, Bristol City Council to consider and implement the feedback provided by members regarding the approach to engagement with Bristol communities on the issue of livable neighbourhoods in order to ensure community buy-in. Thank you.
Did you have another one, Tony?
Yep, the second one is regarding on 27th of July, a statement was submitted by members of People Scrutiny and OSM in reference to concerns about the viewing and sharing of social media posts made by members of Bristol Parent Carers Forum. At the time, the Chair noted that he had been advised that officers were looking into this matter in order to establish the facts, and the Chair asked for them to be allowed to conclude this piece of work before OSM considered whether any additional action was necessary. That piece of work is now being completed. OSM note the conclusions of the officers' report, and in particular OSM supports the recommendation that the Council's social media protocol be reviewed and updated to provide guidance on the viewing and sharing of third-party social media. This process should consider input from the Local Government Association, and we also recommend that a cross-party reference group of councillors should be included in the process. I think OSM also has strong concerns about the statement in the report that there was no formal written decision to authorise the gathering of these social media posts. There is also no evidence of any of the officers considering whether the action they were taking was appropriate. OSM's concern is that regardless of the lawfulness of the actions undertaken, the Council's reputation has suffered as a result of ensuing national media coverage, and the already damaged levels of trust between many parent carers and the councillors has been further diminished. As a result, in agreement with the Chair of People Scrutiny, it was felt that there was a need for an additional agenda item to be added to the next agenda of people of scrutiny, which would be sitting on the 12th of September, to seek further clarification on matters that have arisen as a result of the information published in the officer's report. As the chair of OSM, I think I also want to stress that it's important that all of us involved remember that at the underlying core of this is the education of some children who have particular needs. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tony. So, agenda item 7, Chair's business. I have quite a few things to share today, and I'll try and move through them. The first is to just express our, our thoughts and our concerns for people in Pakistan and people of Pakistani heritage as well. We'll be looking at the floods happening in the country at the moment. These are absolutely devastating. 1,300 deaths, a third of them children, 33 million people displaced. And the UN estimates 128,000 pregnant women need urgent medical care right now, with 42,000 of them expected to go into labour in the next 3 months. 1 million homes destroyed and 2 million acres of crops, along with 750,000 livestock destroyed. We know from the experts on the ground saying the critical needs at this moment in time are hygiene kits, emergency food and shelter, and economic support for people who are losing the means of making a living. And then obviously we have the big job of reconstruction in the country, both the physical reconstruction, but also the emotional, relational reconstruction as people deal with having come through the trauma. The Disasters Emergency Committee are appealing for support now. They say that Pakistan has experienced 8 devastating rainfalls over the monsoon season. The whole country been hit by a severe flash flooding, with regions in the west areas of Balochistan and Sindh the worst affected. Roads, homes, livestock, all the things that we know. The Pakistan's climate change minister, Sherry Rehman, called the floods a catastrophe of epic scale, and the government had declared a national emergency. I've been talking to Councillor Afzal Shah, well, former Councillor Afzal Shah, unfortunately, but been talking to Afzal Shah, and we'll be meeting with members of the Pakistani community this week. We want to know what we can do as a city to support the community in Bristol as they kind of just live life with concern about friends, family, and and the country, in general in Bristol, but also those relief efforts that are being organised from within the city as well. But we'll obviously work with the DEC to support too. Secondly, kind of related to that actually, is that later this week, the City Office, in partnership with the Cabot Institute for the Environment at the University of Bristol, are hosting the launch of the second voluntary local review of our Sustainable Development Goal progress. We were the first city in the UK to undertake a voluntary local review, and now we are running our second. And I go give big hand to Alan MacLeod, who's working in the City Office team, who through the work he's done here has become not just a national lead and exemplar, but an international lead, and it has played over into our own reputation as the SDGs are put at the centre of our One City plan. They're in our corporate strategy, and we have countries and bodies around the world asking us how we've gone about doing our best to drive the implementation of the SDGs. So the report provides updated local data and information about Bristol's progress in delivery of the SDGs, and reflects on some of the constraints local governments and organisations face as they work to accelerate progress. An examination of our partnership-based approach to this is also central to this piece of work. And as we keep saying, there are no real outcomes we can get for Bristol without the city working as a whole. Bristol City Council cannot pull levers and get outcomes. The city is a collective act, and so it's incredibly welcome. And on welcoming, we have been continuing to work on welcoming spaces in Bristol in the face of the winter period of our cost of living crisis. We set out to set up a citywide network of places where people can go to be warm if they're too afraid to put the heating on in their own homes, as we will no doubt see. We have, through our One City approach, actually, we've managed to secure £300,000 that we can then use to support organisations that come forward as welcoming places. We're looking at a network of we're looking at the network of COVID-19 hubs, actually building on that structure we put in place. Faith places, children's centres, sports centres, GP practices, and other community venues people can go to get that connection and to get that support. And we're still looking for volunteers to come forward to help us support those welcoming spaces. They are going to be warm places, but as I was talking to one of our universities today, if we had volunteers, we could be running homework clubs as well to support children that are going to be in those places. So it's working with that local host to design what they will be for people in Bristol during these coldest months. We've got a new Prime Minister. I thought it worth just sharing. We are in the process of organising meetings with the incoming cabinet members, particularly in our role as the city that holds the chair of core cities and the Local Government Association City Regions Board. Did write to Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss before the election. I wrote it was a closed letter. We didn't write an open letter because I think the principle is open letters aren't actually written to the person after the word dear. It's written to the press, tend to be ignored. So we wanted to act with some seriousness, so we wrote to them privately. But we can share the contents of that, and then we made 3 key points. One is, with an incoming Prime Minister, it's an opportunity to reset the relationship with local government. And that's about funding and national leadership. And the scale of the challenges and opportunities we face, we have to be thinking about how we use the full capacity of local government. The second point, which you'd expect to come from Bristol, is we would like government to really to kind of review its understanding of the UK cities. What are we? What do we need them to be? How do we help them become what they need to be to benefit the UK? They need to be dense, decarbonised, inclusive. They need to be engines of economic activity, providing jobs. All these things need to be supported through the transition. And so we offered that conversation with the 2 candidates, as it was, now Prime Minister, to talk to us at Core Cities about recasting that, understanding that relationship with the cities. The third point we made, come off the back, in many ways is in line with a TED Talk that I gave in April, that actually none of the candidates have spoken with any substance about the environment. But if you recast your relationship with local government and with the cities, we could put in place a plan to decarbonise the UK cities. Lots of work has been done already. And you could turn up at COP and make a major announcement that was world-leading in terms of its commitment to decarbonising the nation's cities. And so we've tried to present a challenge, but to show the sheer scale of the opportunity to stand on one of the biggest stages that is going to become available to them very quickly in the next couple of months, in which we desperately need global leadership. So that was the contents of that. And finally, to celebrate Read a Book Day today and mark the start of a new term this week, I'm going to say the starring role, Councillor Ellie King, and I co-read a book I recommend to Tony, might actually, later tonight. First Day at Bug School. It's gripping. So we read that and we've put it out and we've tweeted in Children's TV as well, right? I think we're looking to get picked up post 2024. So yeah, very good. But it is great. We obviously this is about encouraging children to read and get in the habit of reading. So I know we'll all take the chance today to wish our children all the best as they go back to school on their first week. Okay. Agenda item 8. I forgot, Ellie, you did voices as well, didn't you? It's worth tuning in just for the voices. I backed out of that. I didn't do any voices. Okay, agenda item 8, capital update and capital investment decision. Asha, you're bringing this paper.
Okay, thank you. We all want children to have the best opportunities in life, no matter their background. That's why we're supporting the opening of new schools and expanding existing ones to make sure we meet the growing demand for school places in Bristol. This paper identifies prioritisation of capital works projects, resources and associated forecasts for delivering the capital programmes. The total estimated cost of the capital proposals are around £32.8 million, and that is funded from basic and high need capital grant funding from the Department of Education. The grant will deliver additional school capacity in order for the council to continue to meet its statutory obligation and help ensure sufficient mainstream and special educational needs and disabilities school places are available in the city. We are already making significant investments in our SEND provision. The paper notes the progress since the capital programme was authorised in January this year. With the first phase of our ambitious educational capital programme on track to create 142 places by February next year, a new £8.5 million state-of-the-art school, Elmfield School for Deaf Children, is already underway and due for completion around Easter 2023. The new and refurbished school buildings, specifically designed for the sensory needs of deaf children, will be co-located with the adjacent Upper Hallfield Community School and create 142 places by February. This works sits alongside the plans for the 2 new secondary schools, and they are expected to open in Bristol next year, ready for the new school year in 2023. A second phase of SEND minor works is proposed to continue to provide a phased response to the need in Bristol, bringing forward quick wins and high priority projects that will allow us to place children and young people with educational healthcare plans in local provision over which we have a high level of control and influence. More children and young people will be able to access appropriate education in their locality as opposed to travelling out of area. And this will mean improved outcomes for children and young people, a reduced call on the high needs block, and the ability for the council to deliver on its statutory obligation to provide appropriate provision. And most of all, it will mean that we can ensure that the provision is of a high educational quality, delivering the outcomes all children in Bristol deserve. Back to you.
Thanks, Asha. So we've received one public statement, but I don't think that person is in. We've had 4 questions. But not everyone's here. So let's go to Christine Townsend for your question.
Thank you. So there's a shortfall, despite your pathway paper saying that the 450 will be pledged. When I looked and counted, there's over 100 SEM places shortfall. And given that you're using the capital from 23-24 financial year, I'm wondering where the money's going to come from.
Okay, so funding, as you know, is a challenge across the council, particularly in areas where demand and costs are growing. 82 places are being delivered as part of other capital projects at Knoll DGE, Elmfield and City of Bristol College's Project Rainbow. This has been funded through a combination of previous high needs and basic need capital grants. Therefore, phase 1 of the specialist provision project is delivering 142 places. Phase 2 will deliver 188 places. Capital projects are delivering 83 places, and the ESFA return totals 37 places. And this equals the 450 total specialist provision places.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, the two new secondaries that are planned, are there going to be any specialist SEN inclusion units within those two secondary schools?
Hold on a second. Sorry, I don't know. Hold on a second. Sorry, I'll have to come back and respond to you via email on that one. I'll seek further clarification on what's being delivered in those schools. But I think one of the points that I do want to make is that I am working with a number of school leaders and officers. As you may be aware, our youth mayors came out just before the end of the school, end of the summer holidays, or beginning of the school holidays, looking at zero exclusion for the city. I know that zero exclusion triggers a lot of people, not only in the city but around the UK. So, but I am very keen to move towards 100% school inclusion policy, and I'm talking about children with SEN and other children from black and minoritized communities who are perpetually excluded. So I would expect whatever in the new schools that are being built, as well as our existing schools, that we're looking at better integration and more inclusion.
I think do you have a second question, Christine, I think?
I think the second question's been answered, but can I have a follow-up to it?
Sure.
So my follow-up is the local authority owns a primary school that it closed on Brandon Hill, St George, and I'd like to understand what the plan is for that site. St George on Brandon Hill.
We'll come back. It's been subject to conversation.
Oh, we'll come back to you on that one, because I know we are looking at officers are going to be making a presentation to me about the future of that site, so I'll come back to you on that one.
Yeah, I don't think it's fully accurate to say we closed it, though. There was a decision made by the school.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We didn't close anything. The school takes the decision about what schools, whether or not they want to remain open or not.
Okay, thanks very much. I don't think we've got anything else on this item. No other statements or questions. Any cabinet members wish to comment? Kai?
Yeah, just to welcome this paper in general, but to highlight the investment in Elmfield School for the Deaf. So you've been based in Southmead for a long time. I met the leadership there a couple of months ago, and they're very excited about the opportunity that this new investment gives to them, and especially the co-location with mainstream schools as well. But yeah, it's really welcome, because the current buildings that they're operating from definitely come into the end of their life, kind of post-war style school buildings. So obviously not fit for purpose in this day and age for a really high standard of education. So really welcome that investment into the new buildings, and the opportunity it gives them to expand the services that they offer to children. Obviously disappointed that they'll be moving out of Southmead, but it was never a school for Southmead. It's always been a regional. It's always had a regional catchment area. But I think, thanks for bringing this paper, and really welcome the support that we're giving them.
Can I just further add as well? I think, again, just going back to Councillor Townsend's point about additional places, we will have more places being created at Sandwell Academy, Elmfield, as we have mentioned, Briarwood, and King's Weston, as well as Venturers Academy coming through its capital programme.
Thanks, Asha. Tom?
I think just to echo support for this paper, and also being Hallfield Ward Council, obviously really welcoming Elmfield School coming into the ward, and look forward to visiting once it opens.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So let me hand back to you now, Asha, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Okay, and in turning to the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you, Asha. And we're staying with you. Agenda item 9, family hubs and Start for Life.
Okay, so this report seeks approval to accept and spend grant funding from the Department for Education and the Department of Health and Social Care to fund the new Family Hub and Start Life programme. Bristol is one of 75 pre-selected authorities who are eligible for funding, subject to confirmation that the local authority can deliver the programme's requirements and meet any associated grant conditions. The programme will deliver on priorities set out in the One City Belonging Strategy for children and young people, as well as local health and wellbeing priorities. The aim of the programme is to develop seamless support for families, providing a non-stigmatising, a coherent, joined-up Start for Life offer available to all families that supports a reduction in inequalities in health and education outcomes for babies, children and families. So this is really a very positive outcome for ourselves, as we'd already started on the journey to develop family hubs in spite of the government's priorities.
Thank you, Asha. So we've had nothing on this one. The importance of families and hubs and getting a start in life, particularly as we go into the cost of living crisis. But there we go. So any cabinet members like to comment? Nicola.
Thank you, Asha. It won't be a surprise to see me commend and welcome this paper today, and it's something that we've talked about over the last 6 months or so as this has been taking shape. I think any representative of this council that has a children's centre in their ward or near their ward and has seen firsthand the value our existing children's centres bring to the communities that we represent, I would really struggle not to come here today and commend this paper. So I can't believe that there is no one here to speak about it. Members of the cabinet that have got nurseries and children's centres in their ward will speak freely about the benefit they bring to the citizens that we represent. No more so as we enter this winter with a cost of living crisis, and you realise that those staff that will, be part of this family hub model, they're not just practitioners, they're providing social support, they're providing guidance, advice, mental health support. They're as much for the parent as they are for the child, and that shouldn't be necessarily the case in the as-is model, but that is how it is on the ground. And so I'm really thankful that this fund has come our way. I think had we not protected children's centres and nurseries for the last 6 years, that wouldn't be an option for us, frankly. That's my view, not a technical view. And so it just makes me ever grateful that we committed that pledge to protect those centres and that we can now receive these funds and, evolve that service. And so, it's a fantastic thing that we're able to do that today.
I will say that one of the kind of real benefits for us is that we maintained and retained all of our Sure Start centres that developed into our children's centres. But I think for us, a challenge will be how we extend that to young people and young people with disabilities up to 25. So we really need to get that hub and kind of spoke model. But I can, we've got some really good team working on that, and I'll bring back to both Cabinet and full Council the final strategy on hubs in a few months' time.
Thank you, Asha. I'm handing... Wait there. Sorry about that. I'm going to hand back to you now, Asha, to take the decision which I support.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks very much. Sorry, misplaced paper there. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item 11. And Helen, you're bringing this item, Bristol North, Somerset and South Gloucestershire Integrated Care System, Integrated Care Board Constitution and Integrated Care Partnership Terms of Reference. All right, I'm having a shocker in my agenda. All right, so let's just rewind. Let's go to agenda item 10. Ellie, didn't mean to miss you out. My apologies. Sexual health services. I was so excited to get to the integrated care system. Yeah. Agenda item 10, sexual health services, contract extension to March 25, Ellie.
Thank you. Bristol commissions are very important sexual health services on behalf of Bristol, North Somerset, South Gloucestershire, Bath and North East Somerset. Our current contract with University Hospitals Bristol and Western NHS Foundation runs out on the 31st of March 2024. We had planned to recommission these services seamlessly, commencing 1st of April 2024, on the back of the new National Sexual and Reproductive Health Strategy. However, this regulatory guidance has been delayed, which impedes our ability to recommission at this point. This paper proposes a short contract extension of 12 months to allow time for us to receive the national guidance and to ensure that when we do procure, it is to the right specifications and are not misaligned. We have had partnership agreement on this from all providers and commissioners. The extension will ensure we are not misaligned to the strategy, that we fulfil national requirements and allow us to explore different procurement routes and ultimately deliver a great service that delivers sexual health promotion, prevention and treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. We've had no public forum statements or questions on this report. Any of the Cabinet members? No? Contract extension. So, Ellie, let me hand back to you to take the decision which I support and which will be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to make today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you very much, Ellie. So, you'll be pleased to know, I'm just going to say agenda item 11. I won't read the title out again. Helen, now's your spot.
Thanks very much, Marvin. And as your comments have indicated, governance of a partnership body might be seen as not being of particular interest, but I think this is a hugely important paper and is hugely important for the direction of travel of working much more closely with health and community partners in the city and in the wider BNSSG, Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire ICS integrated care system. So the legislation was enacted on July the 1st. There's been a lot of talk about this in the preceding period. And I have to say that the relationships that we have with our equivalents in North Somerset and South Gloucestershire, part of our system, have been really, really excellent. And we've worked very, very well together. That I think probably the local authorities have made more of an impression on the system than perhaps was expected when the legislation came in. I think that there were some in the health world who tended to think that this was at the NHS with a few local authority partners bolted on, and I think what we've established is very much at the partnership board level. It's being led by the local authorities, the 3 local authorities, and we've also worked out a system whereby the local authorities will rotate in chairing that board, and the first chair is my colleague Councillor Mike Bell, the deputy leader in North Somerset. We've also, I think, made far more of an impression than might have been thought on making sure that those community and umbrella organisations of voluntary sector is round the table and are making that impression. So the first job that the integrated care partnership has to do is to create a strategy, and that's got to be back with government by Christmas, unless the new Secretary of State changes their mind, but that's what we're working on, and there is a consultation at the moment, and if people do have the chance to input to that, then please do so, because it's flagged as the big conversation, and this is our opportunity. I think that the other thing that the report does is to note that the 3 of us, the elected representatives who sit on the partnership board, aren't there necessarily just in our cabinet roles, but also as the chairs of our respective health and wellbeing boards. So that in itself is a partnership. So we're taking a partnership view to the overriding partnership. And for me, the other great thing about the work that we've done on the Health and Wellbeing Board in Bristol, and that we take that voice into the overriding partnership, is to give the locality partnerships, so there are 3 in Bristol, North and West, Inner Central and East and South, and to give those locality partnerships a real voice in the work of the Health and Wellbeing Board. So it might sound boring, just passing the terms of reference, but the truth of it is that the proof of the pudding is in bringing that to life in the way that we take the legislation and the integration forward. There is a slight amendment to the report that you've got in front of you, which talks about the role of the Chief Executive on the Integrated Care Board, and he's not there as the City Council representative, but as the representative of the urban voice, because obviously our health footprint, as they like to call it, has got very mixed rural, semi-rural and urban communities. So the Chief Executive is there as the representative of the urban voice. But I'll leave it there, and you know, we're working very, very hard to make this not, as a colleague just a couple of months ago said to me, oh, it's just another reorganisation in the NHS. If we regard it as that, we're not going to get what we need from that to change the outcomes for Bristol population.
Thank you, Helen. And just in line with what you're saying, it's been one of the key topics of conversation at the LGA, hasn't it, with the Health and Wellbeing Board, and the City Regions Board that I'm on as well has been involved in those conversations to make sure that from a local government perspective that there is genuine space for us to be co-leaders, not just to be minor partners of the National Health Service. So we're talking about genuine integration as well. Asha, just I've got to say, there are no public forum statements or questions on this report again, but any cabinet members wish to comment? I know Asha does.
Yeah, I do. This is really quite significant, and it really isn't just about kind of moving the chairs and the tables around. I think one of the biggest prize for us, and again under Helen's kind of stewardship and leadership of our own Health and Wellbeing Board, is the game changer is those local integrated care partnerships that really brings together even local members, councillors can actually influence the delivery on the ground locally. So, yes, it's a terms of reference. It's, it's just words on a piece of paper, but actually this will be a real game changer right for us across the city. So, yeah, I just want to thank Helen for the work that she has done on this, but actually to all of our partners, because this has been in the making for 3-4 years now. And I remember 5-6 years ago when we first came in, and I remember that iteration and what happened, and we were, as councillors, we were actually kept out of the decision making. We were told that we couldn't have anything to do with it, and this is a whole different kettle of fish. So between Helen and actually our own CEO Mike, we've been able to really make our mark on this. So yeah, well done to you.
Thank you, Asha. Ellie?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again to Helen. We have a lot of shared parts of our portfolio, but Helen's leadership and this has been brilliant. Everyone's felt like they're in a very safe pair of hands, and it's it's really great to have Helen leading that and being on the partnership board as well. But yeah, integrated care just allows us to look at care more in the round. It allows us to look at beyond the NHS and bring in prevention and all the important things that allows us to do. Look at healthy lives from the start and see the bigger picture with health. And with that representation of local authorities, we get to make that argument stronger. And with representation from the city's perspective as well, we can talk about those inequalities within the city. And also the greater role that it gives to the VCSE sector, and brings in those voices, that experience, that boots on the ground knowledge. That is such a valuable voice that we need in the room, and it gives a greater agency to that sector. So it's a very exciting time, I think, and thank you very much for bringing that forward.
Any other cabinet members? No, just to say, just a final comment, Helen, and we've talked about this proper leadership structuring, getting the integration is going to be key to the future affordability of health in general, both our own adult care, but also the NHS. And as you talk about, having that framework by which we begin to move upstream and talking about making people well so they don't live so many years with illness that requires adult social care intervention or national health service intervention, then back out into social care. So developing that broader picture, which I, by all things I'm receiving, is something that Bristol is really trying to come to terms with, is incredibly welcome. Okay, Helen, let me hand back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thanks, Marvin. And just before I take the decision, I think that, it's quite easy, isn't it, for people in local government to see the ambulance queues, for example, on the news and think this hasn't got anything to do with us, but actually making that everybody's issue about how you both keep people out of hospital and get them out of hospital as quickly as possible when they are well enough to be discharged, and wrapping the community around those individuals to make sure that they don't then go on to need packages of social care is everybody's problem, and is what we're going to have to do to solve the issues of the budget crisis in both the NHS and in adult social care. So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the amended recommendations as shown on the screen.
Thanks, Helen. And on to agenda item 12, Don. And we've been through family hubs and adult social care, but you have the most popular item on today's agenda.
Thanks, Marvin, as ever. This paper approves the submission of a full business case to the West of England Combined Authority for Transforming Cities funding for a project to improve the Bristol Bridge junction with Baldwin Street. Not only is this aged signal infrastructure in need of replacement, along with many others in the city, unfortunately, but the situation and traffic flows have changed substantially since we took the decision to restrict through traffic over the bridge to private vehicles, buses. This submission will mean that we can lock in those changes for the benefit of pedestrians, as well as improve infrastructure in the area for people on bikes and e-scooters. As many people will know, this is a really busy junction, and this will involve sharing the space amongst many modes, as well as maintaining the access for businesses. It's important we keep the much needed taxi rank and think about bus users in the area too. Finally, the report also includes a bid for funding to replace and upgrade variable messaging signs so that they can reflect network changes. I could say more, but due to the wide public interest, I think much of the detail will come out in the questions.
Thank you, Don. So we've received 3 public forum statements and 11 questions on this item. So the first statement is from Dave Redgewell. Dave, I've put my stopwatch on. I've got it ready. On your marks. Okay, you get a minute, Dave. Okay.
On the West of England Combined Authority to improve buses on this corridor. I think the big concern I have, or we have, particularly on behalf of transport user groups, is the level of frequency we were negotiating with first to include a 10-minute or a 5-minute bus frequency from some of the poorest parts of our city, Southmead, to the city centre and across the city, some of our poorest parts in South Bristol. Those frequencies as we speak today are running at 40 minutes and 20 minutes for the service too. And therefore, whilst I welcome the investment, I think the issue is about how we get the bus operators to understand that they need to invest both in resources in terms of bus drivers, although we are getting drivers, but also that they make sure they don't put all their profitability with government support, government COVID-19 bus operator grant, which has been extended, into the most profitable routes in the city and not into the socially supported network, which some of this forms part of. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Fantastic timing. 1 minute 5. And
Content as well.
It's a long going back between us for the viewers out there. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So let's go to the questions now. So I'm going to just see who's here. Oh, the first question is from Dave Redwell.
Yeah, so my question
Right.
really is about what action we're taking with the Metro Mayor and yourself and Don to really try to get whole first group to account to deliver the City Bus Deal and the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority and North Somerset Bus Service Improvement Plan. Get it right, Enhanced Quality Partnership. So I think that's the concern we really have, is we've got the infrastructure going in. Now we need to hold them to account, really, because I think at the moment the accountancy may not be there in terms of delivery of the service levels and where they're putting their public resources. Maybe I should nationalise them, but that's a different issue.
Well, yep. It's a good point. Don.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Yeah, I agree with you in a sense on that one, last point. And you could mention community transport as well. So there's an awful lot going on at the moment. There's a lot of meetings. We're meeting regularly with officers to discuss the ups and downs of the sector. As you point out, the challenges are mainly related at the moment to the availability of bus drivers. That's quite sad because we have the BSIP funding coming up soon. And we very much hope that there will be an improvement in the availability of drivers so that we can realise the very ambitious plans that we had for next April. But you can be assured that we are meeting very regularly and that the discussions are very robust. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary, Dave, or your second question?
I'll take it as my second question. I suppose the concern is that over these junction, we have a number of services which are non-profitable, supported, and I suppose my question would be, what are we doing to make sure the stagecoach and first group don't purely concentrate their efforts, so you seem to be doing at the moment with resources and what limited drivers have got, on the most profitable bits of the network, and how do we now get them to actually make sure they maintain the buses into the poorer parts of the city region, which may in fact be left without bus services on the 9th of October. So I think my question is, we need to take some action there. I'm not thinking all the time, some resources, something's about how we can go forward. So it's a question really how we fulfil the need of the social need of what I believe to be a public transport system. And maybe I would franchise it, to be honest with you. I'm beginning to think, actually, we should franchise it.
Yeah, I think a lot of your question should largely be addressed to the Mayor of the West of England. But I agree with you that we do need services to prioritise those areas. But it's not exactly built into the system, is it? You know, to meet the needs of the most vulnerable people, a commercial system. It doesn't naturally do that. So there's a danger, you know, it's a bit like, you know, teaching a pig to dance or something. That, you know, why would you, really? It's not generating what we want. And, I welcome the West of England Mayor looking at the overall governance structure. And a BSIP is a step forward. The enhanced partnership is a step forward. But I think we need to look at the longer term future.
Do you have a supplementary, Dave?
I suppose the supplementary would be with North Somerset in the future joining West of England Mayoral Combined Authority, as the government wish, reiterated today by the Prime Minister, I suppose we do need to consider whether or not the model we're using is enhanced quality partnerships, or whether or not we should be looking seriously at franchising the network and taking democratic control over it, because that may be the only way we can serve the communities that I think most of this room care about.
Yeah, I mean, we agree with transport being a public good, ideally publicly owned and run, but always remember there's no substitute for money. The governance model is one thing, but changing a governance model without additional resource could bring its own risks. And that's one of the challenges we've been grappling with, and you'll be fully aware of all that, the different levels of public funding that goes into transport in London versus non-London areas. And that is not to take away from the challenges that Sadiq and London borough leaders face. We're not going to get into territory like that, but on transport, it is just a case that the levels of funding just don't equate. And as Don mentioned as well, the driver shortage as well is another particular challenge we're facing here, but we need the finance. Thank you for your questions as ever, Dave. Really appreciate that, and please bring those again to the Combined Authority as well. From me, I'm sure you will. Okay, so let's move on to next questions. As far Hussein. No. Of course. Councillor David Wilcox.
Thank you, Mayor. I welcome the investment into separated cycling infrastructure for Bristol Bridge, given that there's been a 231% increase in cycling on Baldwin Street since the improved separated cycling infrastructure has been built. Build it and they should come. My first question is, given the proposed solution for the bi-directional cycle lane crossing a motor traffic lane is suboptimal, what is the proposed timescale for delivering a fully segregated cycle lane along Victoria Street, please?
Just a clarification. Bi-directional cycle lane. Is that just a two-way cycle lane?
Yes.
Okay. Don.
Thanks. And what's suboptimal about it?
Because it crosses moving traffic. And there's no give way. It doesn't have priority. It's not LTM 120 compliant.
Okay. And this obviously is a signals refurbishment we're doing here. So,
don't think there's any signals involved in this bit.
Well, this is what the basic plan is. This is part of a wider strategy, which is not yet complete. So if everything that's not yet complete is suboptimal, then we accept that the city is suboptimal. In fact, the world is suboptimal. We will be bringing you further details on the wider plan to Cabinet in future. That's the A374018 wider plan, which is just part of. And we also look forward to some Section 106 coming in from the St Mary Laporte development, which has now been approved, which will again be fed into this area and hopefully reduce the suboptimality of the overall picture.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Not on that, no. My second
You
question.
have a second question then?
I do. I understand the need for motorists to know the status of free parking slots in the numerous car parks in the centre, which is what the VMS signs will be providing. But has any consideration been given into making these VMS signs multi-use by installing a display that could display other information, such as bridge swings or messages about other forms of transport?
Okay, thanks. So by free, you don't mean no money, do you? You mean available?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the point of them is they stop people going round and round looking for places and polluting more and producing more CO2. So that is helpful, is it not, for pollution and for the environment?
Undoubtedly, but it could be used to display other information.
And they can. They're a modern type that can display other things.
Right. Thank you very much for that clarification.
Variable message.
Did you have a supplementary?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. I think that's the end of our questions for that section now. Oh, actually... We had considerably more statements and questions than we did attendees, so we're just checking the seats to see who is actually here. Anyone who asks a question who's not here, we can obviously send them the written response. Any other Cabinet members wish to comment? Kai?
Yeah, again, welcome this paper. Obviously, it was a brave decision to make this change in the first place. A lot of people were talking about it for a number of years, and this administration took the decision to change the setup on the bridge, and I think we're beginning to see the benefits of that now. I mean, we didn't have the money at the time to do these street scene projects, but we're always hopeful that there could be money that came down the line in the future. So it was good to see that this bid is going in. And as Don mentioned, we had some very good news this week with the St Mary Laporte scheme passing the Secretary of State hurdle. It's a great benefit for the regeneration of a derelict site there, but also that does unlock Section 106 money to make further improvements to cycling, walking, bus infrastructure along High Street and Wine Street as well. So you begin to get a complete change to that part of Bristol, the historic part of Bristol. So really welcome this report, and hopefully there's more money to come.
Yeah, thank you, Kai. Any other Cabinet members? No, and I just want to thank you for coming in, Don. This, again, is, like Kai said, it's an exciting time. There's been lots of talk, but actually the physical changes that have needed to happen in Bristol, that have happened, in our time, are real, and some incredibly brave decisions. And actually, even now, I mean, it's all very well to advocate for something, but if you only do it by talking at the council rather than those people who oppose it, like we're facing down all the time as well, it counts for very little. And we are bringing about changes that, in some senses, among some people are popular, and among some other people are not popular. But we know they're the right things to do, and we've faced those up. So I appreciate your leadership on this as well. So let me hand back to you now to take the decision, which I support, and which will be displayed on the screen.
Thanks, Marvin. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. So agenda item 13 now, which is the 2022-23 P4 Finance Exception Report. Craig.
Thanks, Marvin. The Finance Report for Period 4, 22-23 is an exception report, and as such reports only on significant financial issues arising and movements since July's Q1 full report to Cabinet. The report for Period 5, as scheduled to come to Cabinet in early October, will constitute a full report for Q2. At Period 4, the Council's General Fund is forecasting a risk-adjusted overspend of 7.7 million, which is 1.8% of the approved gross budget. This is down by 7.5 million from the 15.2 million at Q1. Material service pressures and risks continue to be adults and children's social care, education improvement, digital transformation, homelessness, temporary accommodation, and the non-delivery of planned savings. This 7.5 million net reduction in forecast since Q1 reflects the significant progress which is being made to identify and implement mitigating actions in response to this year's financial pressures. It should be noted that at present, any excess pressures arising between budgeted allowances for cost of living, such as inflation, energy and pay awards, and latest materialising strains are not yet captured and will form part of the Q2 forecast. Excuse me. The HRA is forecasting a 1.4 million full-year overspend, which is a deterioration of 0.2 since Q1, and the DSG is forecasting a 19.6 overspend. This would bring the DSG carried forward deficit for 22-23 to 44.2 million. The capital programme forecast variance at period 4 is a net 40 million underspend, 4.9 of which is on the general fund, 35.6 on the HRA. That's it from me.
Thank you, Craig. So we've received one public forum statement on this. We have a number of questions to follow, but the statement's from Councillor Heather Mack. So I'll put you on the stopwatch, Councillor Mack.
Great, thank you. During these obviously very tough financial times, I know difficult decisions need to be made, and there's a lot of talk about mitigating actions in this report with no reference to risk assessing these actions. We currently have a large amounts in reserves, and I hope that we're asking about the future costs of these actions. A hiring freeze will seriously impact our services. I'm especially concerned about adult social care, where this could significantly impact the social capital of the system by making those who need our care more vulnerable. Reducing these services now, whilst we have significant sums in reserves, could make both people suffer unnecessarily and cost us more in years to come. Equally, cutting spending now on our response to the climate emergency will just make the actions that we need to reach carbon neutral by 2030 more expensive in future years. And on transport, we are so far off track delivering livable neighbourhoods and cycling infrastructure, appropriate bus services and reducing car use. These won't be cheaper if we delay. Questions to follow.
Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, so let's move to our questions now. We have 6 questions from the in the public forum. Just going to work through to check who's here. And you actually have the first question. So would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. If we look holistically at the city and not just at our bank balance for the next year or two, is it prudent to hold so much in reserves and cut our spend on services at this time of need?
So, I mean, I guess we've had this conversation before, haven't we? So we don't hold reserves just for fun. You know, the reserves that we hold beyond the kind of, oh my God, some disaster has occurred, general fund reserve, are earmarked for specific projects that are set aside for specific things. You just talked about a number of those things actually in your previous statement about low traffic neighbourhoods, cycling infrastructure, our own assets actually that are potentially in or struggling. And of course we did touch on the DSG deficit, which is at 44 million at the moment, and we do need to have reserves set aside to cover that should we be forced to repay that. So yes, we are looking at reserves as part of the review, and we spent a long time on it earlier last week as a cabinet. But of course, it doesn't free up huge sums of money that can solve the problems that we're facing at this moment in time. But we are looking at them as part of the plan.
Do you have a supplementary question?
You referenced a lot of earmarked reserves, but actually our unearmarked reserves, I believe, about double what it is in our target. But I just wanted to ask if you sort of accept that what I'm saying about holistically looking at the city and the reserve that we have and the capital that we have in things that are not just finance, and if you sort of accept that principle about our social capital and our infrastructure capital and not just financial capital and being responsible for that.
Yeah, of course. I guess the problem is we can't abdicate having to balance the budget at the end of the year. So whilst absolutely we take all that in need, and actually to come into probably your second question around almost the whack-a-mole effect of saving money, which is you whack it down over there and it pops up as a problem somewhere else. That's just something that we have to manage and try and pick the least worst option every day. It's very, very difficult, and as the finances get worse and worse, your options, how far down the mole goes, then when you whack it gets smaller every time, and that just is a problem that is exacerbated every year by significant lack of funding from government, continuing lack of funding from government. Add to that now massively increasing costs, as well as the growth of the city and the complexity of the things that we're left delivering, because a lot of the things we used to do, we don't do anymore, makes that a very difficult thing to balance, and it's a constant juggling act, and it's not, it's never easy. But yes, accept it.
Do you have your second question?
Already been touched on, but it's about the mitigating actions and how they're risk assessed. That sort of information isn't being shared. We're looking at decisions that are being made and asked to comment on it, but I'm not seeing anything about how these mitigation decisions are risk assessed, which is why I'm coming and asking about how it's balanced with social capital. So is that happening, and can it be shared?
Yes, I'm sure, yeah. I'm sure it can be shared. It will be, I'm surprised it's not shared through the Finance Task and Finish Group, MTFP Task and Finish Group. But yes, absolutely. So no decision is made without an attempt to consider all of the implications of that decision. That is, of course, a very difficult thing to do, and when you're making least worst options, you probably have to accept sometimes that there are going to be poor outcomes, but you have no choice because it's still the least worst of all the possible bad options.
Can I just ask a question? You mentioned earmarked reserves that are not earmarked.
The answer to I was talking about reserves, and Councillor Cheney replied saying about how a lot of our reserves are earmarked, but we have a large amount in general reserves, significantly more than the amount our strategy states that we need to hold in general reserves.
Can I just get clarity? So, because we don't want people to be misled by loose language, when you say a large amount, how much?
We're talking in the mid 20 millions in general reserves, which is a significant chunk above the strategy stated amount that we need to have.
Okay.
Yeah, so the strategy is to have 20 million, but of course at this moment in time we are carrying a range of epic risks, including things like fire damage to tower block. We've got a huge range of risks that we carry above and beyond what we would usually carry. So yes, we have got slightly above strategy. It's not hugely over, but I think it's probably the sensible thing to do at this moment in time.
It's somewhere close
to
50% over.
We're not having a discussion, but just again, because what we want are these. I'm sure we would all want is that Cabinet and full council don't just become a place where we try and light fires so we can get some tweets and some easy head. We want to kind of get at some truth. Just making a distinction for me, what the difference between holistic, the point you made about the difference between having a holistic view and a view that only looks at the bank account. Do you want to just say a bit more about how you would ask us to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's my question about what money we spend this year, what money we spend next year.
But sorry, can I just say, but you're still talking about money. What's the additional dynamic that comes when you have a holistic view that doesn't just look at money, as opposed to just looking at money? That's what you seem to be suggesting.
So what I'm suggesting in terms of a holistic is I'm talking about, one point was social capital. So if we were looking at the impact that we are having on the city, and such as the overall health of the city, the overall needs of the city in future years. So if we are focusing on what is our security in terms of financial security, we'd be looking at how much money are we going to have in the bank next year. My suggestion is that we really need to look and think that if we spend an extra 10 million this year, would that reduce our spending by 20 million next year because of that social capital, the fact that the health... So I'm not saying that...
You know we do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so again, I mean, let me make an invitation to you, because I know you have had quite a few briefings on the budget and reserves, and I think you shared with Craig that you actually understood the points, but the question doesn't suggest you've totally come to terms with the way the reserve actually works. But I'll offer you another thing. We can offer you a briefing on the One City plan. You might also want to try and ask Councillor Beach for some time. We've been doing quite a bit of work on resilience. We had a resilient strategy. The whole point of the strategy is to, and if you can look at UN Habitat's work on this as well, that we're going to be working off, and we're actually raising this as a national piece of work with the LGA City Regions Board. The whole point of resilience is to look at the drivers of future shocks. Now, those could be explosive shocks in and of the moment, like a flood, or they could be slow simmering shocks that build up over time, like a growing nag in society that comes out as a growing mental health crisis in our population. But these are all things that we are grappling with all the time. But there is another reality. The reason I'm just trying to get from you what that subtle but significant difference is because it's all very well having a holistic worldview, but stuff's got to get paid for. And it's not that having an eye on balancing the budget and being, operating within our responsibilities of being responsible is somehow lacking a holistic view. It just means that as a local government leader, you have to work in a world in which you have to return, a balanced budget. There is no alternative. And then unfortunately, there is a context to that, which is towards austerity, the impact of Brexit, and growing population needs as well on the back of a growing population, and obviously the impact of the cost of living crisis. Remember that word. It's not the feeling of living crisis, it's the cost of living crisis. And so one of the things that we have to do is get involved in that whole area of the cost of living. And so I just don't want us to end up kind of floating off in the clouds, thinking we're going to sit around a campfire and come up with some kind of holistic view that hasn't got anything to do with the financial responsibilities we have as an organisation. But Tom, you had, I know...
Can I reply to that?
Well, it wasn't a discussion. I was just making a point in response to your statement and in your questions as well. So we'll move forward. But I'm happy to
there were quite a few questions
We're happy to have conversations outside of here. I know you've had a number of briefings. We're happy to give you more.
I mean, I feel like I could have the right to respond to the questions.
But at some point it needs to land. That's the challenge. Otherwise we're spinning our wheels. But Tom, Helen, you had comments as well.
I think just briefly, the forward look of the implication of things is exactly why we've retained the council tax reduction scheme as a Labour administration, where every other core city has not. So, and the other thing I would say is you should bear in mind that once reserves are spent, you then haven't got that money anymore to withstand further shocks. And actually there's a whole programme of work around mitigating actions across adult social care and all the things Craig listed, including temporary accommodation. No fault evictions are up. Our TA pressures may increase, and that's a general fund pressure. And so we have to be bearing all these things in mind so we don't eke away and waste away our reserves, because that would be actually really irresponsible.
Can I...
Helen.
just to say that I'm very concerned about you scaring people in our adult social care recipients by saying that we're cutting the services. We're not cutting any of the services. If you want to identify to me which services you think are being cut, because none of them are. In fact, we're working really, really hard to protect services. We haven't made any cuts to services in the last 4 or 5 years. We have a statutory duty to provide the services that people are eligible for, and we were given you can grin, but it's actually quite serious, because what happens is you make a comment like that and I get emails from people worried that their services are going to be cut, and I have to write back to them and reassure them that they're not. During COVID, we had the ability, as did all local authorities, to reduce the amount of support that we were giving to people. We did not use that function that government gave us. We did not use it. So please don't talk in that way, because it's shroud waving and it scares the people who are most vulnerable to those to any potential cuts in services. We're finding other ways to meet those needs.
Thanks for the clarification, Helen, Tom. Let me hand back to you now, Craig, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thank you, everyone. In terms of the decisions we made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. So on to the final item, International Strategy Refresh, and I'm going to bring this report, and I'm really happy to be introducing a refreshed international strategy. It was first developed in 2017, actually, considering Bristol's been on the world stage for such a long time that, we've pulled together that strategy with our city partners, and it was refreshed earlier this year to reflect changing contexts like Brexit and COVID. And I'd like the Cabinet to note the contents of this report today, and I'll move over a few now. So the strategy does show how Bristol is showing leadership, both nationally and across the globe, on shared values, and particularly the UN Development Goals of inclusivity, sustainability and resilience. And this report sets out some examples of this important work, and I'll share some of those now that highlight the value of the work to Bristol. So in our twinning examples, the Nicaraguan Fair Trade Producer Initiative has reached 2,000 local school students every year for 12 years, bringing international farmers into schools to deliver fair trade education programs. Language teaching, for example, the Bordeaux Mini Assistance annual scheme reaches hundreds of children each year in 6 primary schools. Cultural organisations benefit from joint projects, exhibitions and training, ranging from international exhibitions attracting tens of thousands to small-scale community-based collaborative arts and dance projects. For example, the current RISE Youth Dance Initiative with Hanover counterparts. The twinning input into community festivals such as the Bedminster Winter Lantern Parade includes, which has 5,000 visitors, includes inspiring hundreds of primary school children, creating giant lanterns inspired by twin cities, or Upfest, which attracts 400 artists and over 50,000 visitors each year. Businesses benefit from starting new or continuing existing trade with trusted partners through trade delegations, specific sector conferences and long-term business network partnerships such as the Bristol Junior Chamber links with Bordeaux and Hanover. We had the Global Parliament of Mayors Summit, more than 2,500 Bristol citizens involved in the Global Parliament of Mayors related events, 67 mayors, 36 countries in the city on that occasion, more than £250,000 invested in the local economy, 32 international media outlets in 15 countries covered the summit, along with representatives from the United Nations, World Trade Organization and other international bodies. UNESCO City of Film. In 2017, Bristol was designated UNESCO City of Film, recognising the city's achievements as a world leader in the field of film and the moving image. Annual figures released today by Bristol Film Office show that film and TV production generated more than 20.8 million towards the city's economy, 22% increase on pre-pandemic figures, and the largest contribution that filming-related activity has made towards Bristol's economy in a decade, all enhanced by our membership of UNESCO. There are other meetings and events which have had a direct benefits for Bristol. Overseas meetings with the Department of Trade and MIPIM has resulted in realising the City Leap project and the Bocklock housing development. In 2022, the Council and partners secured Horizon Europe funding worth in the region of £280,000 to Bristol City Council as part of a wider £3.5 million project, and the project will focus on East Bristol Livable Neighbourhood Pilot project. And my TED Talk in Vancouver led to a number of live contacts, not least a tech philanthropist who will be in Bristol in the coming weeks with a commitment to work in 3 UK cities, meeting with our community development, our community organisations, with a commitment to putting real finance into their social innovation. In consultation with the 19 International Strategy Board members from across the city, that's from across business, universities, community organisations, the strategy refresh reflects all of their context and drives a stronger focus on working with Bristol's international diaspora, a priority welcomed by numerous organisations in the city. And the strategy is aligned to the corporate strategy and supports delivery of that and city partner international goals and activities. This really is about pulling Bristol together, those organisations and networks that are engaged on the global stage, both through family, through countries of origin, through business, through culture, and getting us into alignment so that we work together and support each other for all of our collective betterment. So from the twinning associations since 1947 through to today's activity delivering our climate and ecological emergency programme, Bristol's global relationships and reputation has continued to grow. It's more important than ever that cities connect, collaborate, and change the context within which they have to operate. It's the way we can deliver for the citizens within our city boundaries, but it's actually in the absence or the underwhelming leadership offered by national governments on critical issues such as climate and migration. It is fallen onto the shoulders of cities to step into that leadership vacuum, and we cannot turn our back on those networks and those forums through which we will raise our voice on these critical issues. In 2021, Bristol was a driving force in setting up the city's Commission for Climate Investment, which includes UK core cities and London. It's now known as 3CI. It's developing a new model for cities to work with government and the private sector to fund the large-scale projects that cities need to meet their carbon emission and nature recovery targets. At the moment, working together, we've identified over £200 billion worth of decarbonisation investment opportunities across the UK, and it's worth adding that some of the early thinking on that came out of the work we've done with the World Economic Forum on the Future Global Cities group, in which I'm on with Greg Clark and Yvonne Aki-Sawyer, and Susan Aitken, leader of Glasgow as well. So being in these forums has led to some globally significant pieces of work, and we'll see those reflected in COP in November. Bristol was actively involved also in the high-level political climate event COP26 in Glasgow, as I just mentioned, which is attended by national leaders and in government and business from around the world. And there, on behalf of Bristol and wider networks of cities, we raised the need for an equitable, a just, as well as a green transition that benefits all with the new finance models for cities to deliver the projects. One of the points we have made repeatedly is that the cost of transition is not just about the physical infrastructure, but it's about the cost of supporting populations to transition through that economic restructuring we must go through as we meet our climate targets. So it's important that cities continue to lead on this. I thank the international team, and I see Caroline sitting up there, for all the work they've done to really support our global presence. And I think it's just worth sharing. It is a presence that is out of all proportion to the size of Bristol. And a number of requests we now have to contribute to national and international conversations on issues ranging from climate to ecology to SDGs to migration is a testament to the quality of the work and the leadership they have shown and the service they have provided to the city. So we have received 2 public forum statements on this. The first is from Bristol Consular Corps, Dr. Razvan Constantinescu. Raz? Okay, Raz in here. And the second, it was from Sado, but I don't see Sado, from Sado Jode from Black Southwest Network. Okay, so let's move to the questions from Councillor Martin Fodor.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. As I say in the written questions, I'm delighted we've got a global strategy, and I've supported the sort of international projects and work for the Council over many years, going back to the 90s, various projects and initiatives, and our twinning and networks. The 2 questions, firstly, I don't see an action plan for implementing this. Can you say what measurable targets have been achieved in the time since 2017?
So an implementation plan was developed with partners at the start of the strategy and reviewed after the first year. So it's important to say it's not just the City Council's plan. This is the piece of work was to bring the city together, all those organisations that are working internationally, like I just mentioned, a few of them. The implementation plan was also incorporated into the team service plans, linking this work to the corporate strategy as well. Those very earliest conversations about the strategy, because again, it's not just written on a blank piece of paper, was that it was a drawing together of existing plans from our partners as well, who had their own measures in there. So for an example, one of the reasons when we looked at where would we focus, which countries would we focus on for trade, and that led to some of our early trade delegations. That focus and the results of that came from talking to our city partners about where we think the best advantages for Bristol are, not just in the council. I will say with our international work, it's not always easy to show direct benefits because the team drives a lot of the work and coordinates across the city. And some of this is about creating the conditions in which other things happen, good things are more likely to happen. And we've had that numerous times. So, for example, given a talk in Vancouver for TED, who would have known that a tech philanthropist now has said, well, actually, off the back of that, I'm going to come to Bristol and put money into your voluntary community sector organisations. We didn't know. So in many ways, it's about being present, creating the conditions, and hopefully good stuff will happen. And because of our partnership, we're well placed for that to happen. But multiple targets have been achieved. 4 impacts were outlined in the report. For example, having a direct influence on the Global Compact for Refugees, which we did to make sure it explicitly mentioned cities and didn't miss us out, which has a material impact on the experience of people in the middle of the migration crisis at the moment, and others are in the attached document. But the International Strategy Board was established to increase coordination, which it has done, and communications about our international activity, which it has done across those priority areas for city partners. I will share that one of the bits of feedback in terms of our reputation with British Council as well, who said that our Global Parliament of Mayors Summit in Bristol, delivered by the international team, was one of the most successful global events ever held in our city. It said it feels like the Global Parliament of Mayors has really been built to the next level right here in Bristol, and it was a privilege to be part of it. British Council. We are proud, Womble Bond Dickinson, we are proud of what's taken place for the city to host the summit. We have built many connections and engaged with a number of cities and businesses during the summit. And actually, Womble, when we went to the United States on our trade delegation, were one of our host organisations as well. So we can see that reputational gain and the connectivity that we've won from this. So, yeah, as you might imagine, I'm incredibly proud of what the team have achieved. Your supplementary question, Martin, or your second question.
Yeah, if we could go on to the second question at this point. So has there been a cost-benefit assessment of the council resources specifically that have been invested in the programme to deliver the strategy?
Yeah, so the annual cost of the team is £270,000, but it's worth recognising how much they raise as well through in-kind support. So there are many things that happen internationally that we don't pay for, but we're asked to attend and we're asked to influence. And obviously that will hopefully it will play back into the 3CI investment that will hopefully come our way as well. But benefits include, so financial benefits in 2022 so far through one programme of international funding, the team secured Horizon Europe funding worth £280,000 to Bristol City Council as part of a wider £3.5 million project. The twinning officer typically secures about £35,000 for twinning activities. In addition to finance, we help secure capacity building opportunities. For example, we had the investment from Bloomberg Harvard City Leaders Initiative directly into Bristol as well. I will note here also the work with our Brussels office as well, which has kept us on the front line. Now, that's targeted by the Conservative group every year for cuts in the budget, but having gone through Brexit, we thought that actually maintaining our position in Brussels was incredibly important, and that's actually one of the key conversations that are happening amongst core cities as well now. In the absence of national government leadership and a Prime Minister that questioned whether Macron was an ally or not, it's important for us to be able to cultivate those relationships, not just for local government, but for our diasporas, for our universities, for our businesses. Did you have a supplementary, Martin?
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for detailing that. I certainly support our presence in Brussels and elsewhere. Choices have to be made in terms of where we prioritise the effort, and you did yourself refer to the fact an awful lot of requests then arrive. I can understand that. So how is that prioritisation carried out?
Well, we look at what we're actually we look at our priority areas, and it depends. There's a question about availability, and there's a question of priority, and whether we can look at whether we think there's going to be a direct payback for Bristol, whether it be now or in the future. But we also look at sometimes is ours a voice that's needed at this particular point in time. And that's not to say ours is the only voice, but it does seem to be the case at the moment that on a number of issues, not least climate and migration, that ours is a voice that many organisations and cities and events around the world are asking to hear. And so one of the things we'll ask ourselves is, even if we can't see that direct benefit coming back to Bristol in a straight line, do we see that we can contribute to a progress in the global conversation and action that the world desperately needs? And we'll take that into consideration as well.
Okay, thanks very much. No further supplementary.
Thanks very much. Any Cabinet members to comment on this item? Tom.
Again, just to speak in support of this, I think the other thing I just wanted to highlight was also another international programme work we're involved in around the UN Habitat Climate Smart Cities Challenge as well, where we've been one of four cities globally that is working on a sort of a particular challenge that we've focused on how we address housing in the context of climate emergency, and how you also make that stack when you're trying to deliver affordable housing, and that's seeing again financial investment that will come forward to the winning team that will be announced later this year.
Thank you. Asha?
Yeah, I also welcome this report, and you will see that I chaired the diaspora working group that brought together nearly 20 different individuals representing many of our people from different countries of birth right across the city. So I think for me, the point I wanted to make, again, following on from our point Bristol, in the opportunities I've had to represent Bristol on the international stage, our reputation is by far well respected in terms of the green agenda. I think my very first experience, particularly around the food agenda and food equality, and organisations across the world looking at Bristol in terms of the work we did on Going for Gold, our now food equality strategy. You know, we are constantly being asked to speak to and speak on behalf of on a range of different fronts. So my point really that I want to make is that no matter what, our work around our international work is extremely important. You know, the days of navel gazing are over. We need to acknowledge the fact that we are an incredibly diverse city, and only going to become even more so when we see the outcomes of the census that is about to be published. So, you know, the strategy for me really does encapsulate the ambitions that we have. It's inclusive. It's necessary. Thanks.
Thank you, Asha. Don.
Thank you. Yeah, just if I may highlight the message of appreciation from Dr. Raz Constantinescu, and on behalf of the 11 honorary consuls accredited to Bristol and South West, which is very kind of him, but also just to remind everyone that he continues to collect aid and to transport it out of the depot in Bristol for people in Ukraine. I was able to visit some of the people at the other end of that in Moldova and Romania a few months ago. And though the story has disappeared from the headlines, I do think it's time to remind everyone that that problem's still going on, and that Raz and the team are still working hard to address it, and they deserve our support and appreciation for all they're doing.
Nicola?
Thanks, Marvin. There's some powerful contributions there, definitely. Don, I think I just wanted to add in, from a placemaking perspective, we often exhaust UK examples, and there's a real power in the international team, open-mindedness to learn, to reach out to those European cities and partners like Catherine in Malmo. Marvin, you remember we've done a lot of work with Malmo as a city. We have a lot of symmetry as to municipal areas, and learn from their experiences. You know, notwithstanding the changes in governance and we are the most centralised country in Western Europe, but you still learn how they actually develop their sense of place and their sense of communities. And so, really good examples around Portugal, examples from the Basque region, examples from Malmo, as I said, examples from Berlin around community ownership, absolutely inspiring to us as a city as we try to build progressive policy that you just do not see in this country at the moment. So I just wanted to make that point in there about learning, because it's something I found hugely valuable since being in this role.
Thanks. Kai?
Yeah, thanks. Just really welcome this report. Obviously, something you didn't have to bring, but I think it's really important to highlight the report. And I guess the international strategy of the city's been long-standing, and it's changed over the years from when twinning first started, when that was about peace and reconciliation, to now where we're delivering major investments on the back of our work into the city. I mean, City Leap is an amazing example. It's a £424 million investment over the next 5 years based on the international work that we've been doing with investments from Sweden and the USA. You mentioned the EU 100 climate neutral cities that we're part of. So it's more important than ever that despite Brexit, that we're involved with our European partners. And that's a £95 billion programme under the Horizon programme. So we're part of that. It's not only financial, we get all the advice and networking and knowledge sharing from that. And I also think not only are we acting in the interest of the city, we're also acting in the national interest as well, delivering that investment into the city, working with partners across the world. The Eurocities network is quite valuable as well, and there's a lot of talk at the moment within that network about the support that cities provide to the reconstruction of Ukraine. So again, supporting national policy. So yeah, really support this piece of work coming to the Cabinet today.
Thanks, Guy. Okay, so as you said, this is a non-key decision. We brought it for the sake of transparency and openness on the international work we do. So just to say, Cabinet notes the report. So that's the end of today's Cabinet meeting. Thank you all for attending. I mean, there is just something I'm going to add, and I've said it, a number of times. I just kept up a tally of what people engage with, councillors. The engagement on the traffic signalling had more questions on that than we had on all the other items put together, covering family hubs, sexual services, adult social care, integrated care. We're moving. There is a journey, obviously, from May 2024, in which this will be a committee system. To be successful, councillors need to get in the habit of actually attending the meetings and not just picking on the issues that they believe will produce a tweet or a headline, but actually are the issues of substance. As Helen said, even if it's not glamorous as an issue, working on the terms of reference, we need to get in the habit of attending these meetings and covering the whole agenda. This happened before once when everyone left the room after we did the walking and cycling, and the next item up was children's care homes, and there was no questions on children's care homes. So I just make the appeal. Please engage with the political process and let's ask questions of real substance and meaning in an effort to get our city closer to truth and get our city in a position where it's more able to cope with the complex challenges of today's world rather than just looking for cheap, quick hits. So thank you everyone for being here. Then the date of the next Cabinet meeting is Tuesday the 4th of October and I will see some of you and hopefully more of you there. Take care.